My presentation is on Doctors Without Borders. Did you know that almost half of the world does not have access to healthcare, according to a report from the World Bank? Doctors Without Borders provides care to those who need it most, saving hundreds of thousands of lives every year. I've read a variety of journals and articles on international healthcare access and read about Doctors Without Borders for this topic. For my first point, I'll get into how Doctors Without Borders started and the extent of their operations. For my following point, I will look into the response to COVID-19 and the ongoing refugee crisis. Finally, I will go over how Doctors Without Borders can be supported and why they deserve donations. Doctors Without Borders started in France in 1970 with a group of doctors and journalists. Started with just under 200 members, but now has over 60,000. Doctors Without Borders operations include providing vaccinations, primary mental health care, shelter, nutrition, and potable water. Doctors Without Borders is active in over 70 countries worldwide. They operate in regions of crisis all over the world. Outside of humanitarian aid, Doctors Without Borders works as a lobbyist group, meaning they put pressure on governments around the world to change policy. Also, they work as a news organization. They provide news across the globe in places where few journalists go. Now let's move on to their role in COVID relief. As of April 2nd, an estimated 6,800,000 people around the world have died from COVID-19. During the peak of COVID, Doctors Without Borders played a pivotal role in relief. Clinics were able to care for patients as hospitals became overflowed around the world. They also played a role in vaccine distribution, getting into rural, out-of-reach areas. Now I'll talk about how Doctors Without Borders helps the refugee crisis. The refugee crisis. One of the biggest patrons of Doctors Without Borders clinics are refugees. The number of refugees has increased exponentially from the 1950s and continues to rise, with increased conflict like in war in Ukraine, civil war in Ethiopia, climate change, making areas inhospitable, drives these migrants out of their countries. Refugees are those who have been displaced by conflict, famine, or lack of opportunity. There are currently 26 million refugees worldwide, not including 4 million who are actively seeking asylum. Some host countries don't provide health care for refugees without payment. Without groups like Doctors Without Borders, refugees without money would have no access to health care. According to Refugees from Disease, Mitigating Communicable Disease in Refugee Populations by Sue Kang-Kor, in some host countries deliberately withhold care from refugee populations, fearing that providing healthcare services to refugees generates social unrest among citizens, especially in countries where healthcare systems are already overburdened. Now let's talk about why you should donate to Doctors Without Borders. Doctors Without Borders is rated 4 stars out of 4 by CharityNavigator.org. Charity Navigator looks at efficient use of funds and cost effectiveness of charities across the globe. Doctors Without Borders received 4 stars out of 4. Doctors Without Borders uses its donations efficiently. 85% going to programs, 14% to fundraising, and 1% to management and general administration. Now let's summarize. Today we talked about the organization Doctors Without Borders, an inspiring story of how few people can start a global care movement. We first looked at how Doctors Without Borders started and the extent of their operations, how they provide more than just humanitarian aid as a lobbyist group and news organization, followed by their help in COVID relief and the refugee crisis. Finally, we looked at why people should donate. I'll end it on a quote from the great Dr. Martin Luther King. All forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane